Let's get started. Hope you are all doing well. I considered sitting outdoors today, but I think it's going to get dark really soon. This is a major bummer. I know not a surprise. It's something I should know. Every year it happens, but it's still a bummer. So first off, let me make sure, are you guys all hearing me okay? Loud and clear? Okay, great. So let's start by taking attendance. Give me a shout out if you're in the room. That'd be awesome. Bridget.
Here.
Elise.
Here.
Morgan.
Here.
Haley. Let's see. I think this is who Haley Gooches.
Here.
Samantha. I think Samantha is not going to be here today. Grace Joseph. Darshana.
Yep. Here.
Claire.
Here.
Thanks, Claire. Got your message.
Thanks.
Leah.
Here.
Wait, did I say it wrong? No, I did. Okay.
No, you got it.
As soon as the words came out, I was like, Leah? No, Leah. Okay. Haley. Other Haley.
Here.
There you are. Izzy.
Here.
Miranda.
Here.
Daniel. Oh, Daniel just came in right as I called his name. Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
Jasmine.
Here.
And Grace Sweet. There you are. Okay. A little bit of housekeeping. I've received emails from groups that have formed. Grace Sweet, if I could figure out, it was super helpful. You sent an email and you said the people attached to this email are also part of the group. But Aquinas does weird emails, like it's like TR147, and I don't know who that is. So who is in Grace Sweet's group? Okay, Izzy, Leah. Is there a fourth? I thought there was a fourth. Do you guys remember who that was? No one in this room? Or Grace, you're looking? Okay.
It's Tarshana. Yeah, it's Tarshana.
Tarshana, okay. Okay. So I've got 12 people that are in groups, and we have a class of 16. So I've got 4 people without a group. Who does not have a group? That might be the easiest way. Can you shout out your name?
Claire, so I don't have a group, but I just posted a topic idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
Super. Anybody else not have a group that's here today?
I don't think I'm in a group.
Okay, Daniel. I'm trying to, just by process of elimination, I think Elmar.
I also don't have a group.
That Miranda?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that rounds off the 16. So the 4 of you, then if you want to be in a group, chat together, because we need to make sure that we have our topics more solidified. Grab each other's names from the class. So it looks like Claire, Daniel, Elmar, who is off in the Netherlands. So just coordinate with him. He's been great via email with me. And then Miranda. And then we'll get you guys going so we don't miss any more opportunities to get this all wrapped up. Okay, so first thing of business is I want to take a peek here at our syllabus. I just feel like it keeps us on track. So today we're going to talk about good measurement, And we need to make sure that our research topics are solidified today. So that group, if you guys want to all follow the idea that Claire had, that's fine. If you want to talk it through and make some changes, that's fine too. Just let me know by the end of today, if possible, at the very latest tomorrow, what your final project or research topic is going to be, and then we'll go from there. Next week, we have article critique number 2 that is due. And then the week after that, September 30, we have our first exam. So this, I mean, the pace of this class moves swiftly. I don't know why, you guys, I still have a fall break on here. This may not be my most recent syllabus, but there's no fall break. So this is not meant to be a bait and switch, but there's no fall break. So the exam is going to be a combination of multiple choice and short answer. By short answer, I just mean like a small paragraph response. Does not need to be longer than 5 to 8 sentences, you know, just a paragraph. The way it's going to work is we're going to be hosting the exam in class. So we will get started on the Zoom call. I'll introduce the test, any notes or items that you need to know about the exam. And then you'll get it started and the exam will close by 8 o'clock, which is the end, or 9 o'clock, which is the end of our class. And if you have any questions during that period of time as you're taking the exam, I'll make sure to include on the exam my cell phone number so you guys can call, text me and ask me any questions that you may have so that we all stay on track and get it completed. So if you need additional time on an exam, if you have any questions about the format of the exam, internet access, or as we get closer, you're ill or something comes up, please do let me know. But again, the exam is set up for September 30, so it's 2 weeks from now. So just good reminder, research topics need to be submitted no later than tomorrow. Article 2 critique will be due next week, and then the exam after that. Okay. Any questions about the syllabus and what we're doing?
So each one of us has to submit the research topic?
No. So Tarshana, I think you were out of maybe you weren't there. I was asked, Samantha, Grace, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't know if you were telling me.
I was just saying that Tarshana's in my group, so that
yes,
like we're covered already.
Yep, yeah, so that's what I was saying. So Tarshana, we figured it out just a minute ago that you're in a group already, so that's no problem. If you don't, for those of you that didn't have a group, we need to make sure the research topic is submitted no later than tomorrow, just so I know where people are heading with their thoughts and all that. Any other questions? Okay, let us dive in to, none of these are the right, hold on here. Somehow I don't have the right PowerPoint up. Here it is. This is what we want. And then we want this and that. All the things, you guys. So much technology that needs to be figured out this semester. All right, so we're going to be talking about identifying good measurement. Specifically, when we talk about research, what does it look like when we do accurate measurement that allows us to derive the correct conclusion from the data we've gathered? Okay, so it's going to be kind of a roundabout coverage of how we can measure data, how we can go from a hypothesis level. Again, we talked about the research project, so research question, then your hypothesis, your research design, and then you get the data. Then what do you do with it? You found a way to measure it. What does that look like? So let's dive right in. So how do we measure variables? There's going to be multiple ways. We'll go over that today. How do we know if the measurements we're getting are reliable, right? We're going to hit both issues of reliability and validity. Both of those are crucial in research. Well, before I dive in, we'll get into that in a minute. And then we'll talk about how to interpret the construct validity concept. So when we have a larger topic, right, and then we decide this is what we're studying, how do we evaluate how valid the way we measured it is, right? If I ask you guys, let's take a test on statistics, I think I gave this example before, and the entire exam is in French, well, it's not going to be a good way to assess your understanding of statistics because it's in French, right? That's going to be the predominant thing that you take away from that. So how do we make sure that we're actually testing what we think we're testing? All right, so the first thing I want us to do, and you guys, we're just gonna have to play it by ear and see if this actually works. Let's see here, if we can get this to go. So I need feedback from all of you as to whether you can hear. Could we hear that? Can you even see the TED Talk?
I can't see or hear it.
Always a good start. We're neither way. Okay. Can you see it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cannot hear it.
Can't hear.
Okay. I'm going to mess with it for just a hot minute. Because you guys, there's got to be a way that this works. Now? Did you guys hear that? No.
No.
You guys, not possible. Okay, let's try that. No. Okay, plan B. So we are gonna do what we did before, and where is it? Right here. We are gonna go, oh, here, I can, no, I can't do that. I'm gonna go right here. Stop share. It's always fun when technology is like, nope, you thought this was gonna work, it's not gonna work. Okay, so I am doing what we did last time, which is including it in the chat. Okay, did everybody get the link in the chat? Yes? Is that a yes? Okay, thank you, Elise. And then it is 13 minutes. So start watching it, and I will watch it alongside you guys so that we end around the same time. Oh, what's going on? Okay, all right. Is everybody done? Okay, looks like it. Okay, what do you guys think? Takeaways from this?
I kind of got like, don't feed into like false information because people can like tell you stuff that's like not really true or can say something that you might think is true. False advertisement almost.
Mhm.
How are they allowed to withhold all that information? Like, I don't understand how that's legal because it even said with the Thermoflu, I think it was, that they withheld it from the government.
Mhm. Because it's an internationally produced drug, then there's less oversight that way, just an independent company. So the question goes with, okay, so taking a step back, how much research projects and research studies and trials are being done daily? Thousands, right? Tons and tons. From that, if you are testing a medical drug or any sort of drug, you need to report back to the company that makes it. But if the results show that it is a terrible drug, for instance, or causes more harm or things like that, the pharmaceutical company can squash it down and prevent it from being actually published. So that's why that piece that he talked about, that graph that looked like this, the log linear, showing where the larger studies clump together and where you got false positives and false negatives, they were kind of charted out, but those are smaller studies. That chart he showed where you had none on one side, that shows huge bias, right? Like there needs to be some sort of evenly split positive and negative results for a drug. So Jasmine, going back to your question, how is that possible? It's a good question. It shouldn't be. All data should be available. But flip side is, how would a medical professional, how would they make a decision from there? If, you know, every drug, okay, I need to prescribe an antidepressant. Yeah, maybe that's where we should start the conversation. You're a medical doctor trying to just prescribe an antidepressant. Where do you go? How do you start? Which do you choose? What do you think?
Well, you would choose whichever one, I guess, like, yeah, has like the best ratings in medical journals that you would know that are related to whatever form of depression or issues that person had, like only like the journals that are out there.
Right. So somehow going back to the literature and see where there's positive results, where it's being discussed. Okay. So I'm hearing within that even one of the issues he brought up, right? The issue of authority, because, you know, I've got a degree after my name, but am I publishing papers on antidepressants? No, that's not my area of expertise. But journals, peer-reviewed journals will accept paper, even opinion pieces or analysis of previously done research based on people with authority, right? People who are well known within that community who say, hey, this is the drug. Okay. What's another way that a doctor would decide which antidepressant to prescribe?
Would they look at the effects that the drug like endures on the patient, or like you know, the side effects or something?
Yeah. So one is, what is the benefit? And then maybe looking also, what are the cons, right? Like, okay, so maybe it's great, but it's going to be like life impacting with negative side effects. So sure. Yeah. Bridget, you unmuted yourself a couple times. Is there something you had in mind?
Sorry.
Yeah.
They typically pick off a list from what other people have said, like they have a list, but they're also like, I don't know if this is bringing in an issue that's not relevant, but like they're bound by insurance. So
Yes.
they have to stick to like the basic ones, the cheapest to produce. So like typically you hear a lot people are on Zoloft. It's probably one of the most famous ones, but it's not the most effective, but it's like approved by most insurances.
Yeah, so I love that, right? So we can take the scientific approach, which one says they're the best, which one says they have the fewest side effects. But then there's a very real factor, which is what's going to get paid out? What's going to get my client, my patient, to actually feel better because they can take the medicine. And if it's unaffordable, they're not going to take it. So which one has been approved? And there was something in the video, he talked about risperidone. Did you guys hear what he said? He was like, once the drug was available to be duplicated. So that means the patent for it had gone. And so then companies could come up with their own derivative of the medication or the generic formula. So if you guys go to and pick up a prescription, a lot of times it's going to be whatever the prescription is for, and it's going to say something like similar to whatever the main drug may be. So do you guys know what I mean by that? Like it's a generic form, and it's cheaper, right? So exactly. So which one is going to be, you know, cost effective for the client or patient? But also similarly, the other big piece with that is a primacy effect. Did you guys hear primacy and recency effect in your psych classes? Okay, so something is going to stick in your mind. You're more likely to remember if it was at the very beginning when you were like first exposed to something or at the very end. Specifically with recency effect, if a pharmaceutical company or a pharmaceutical rep just went to your office and delivered a free lunch, all the goodies, right? Like funky pens with like the name of the drug on it, notepads, what might that influence a doctor's prescription power? I think it does. I mean, that's just the bottom line, right? That otherwise the pharmaceutical reps wouldn't be there doing that job. So all of those factors impact it. Now and Bridget, I agree with you. We kind of went on the deep end with the financial piece and the being cynical a little bit, but in terms of research, we have to be really careful. And there's a huge problem in how we measure data and how we then report the data if a lot of it has been withheld. Or, as he mentioned, I can report the data as excellent if my comparison group is ridiculous, right? So if there's a drug that's going to treat headaches, for instance, I know a lot of drugs that can impact headaches, right? Tylenol, Motrin, what are some other drugs? Headaches, Aleve maybe, or aspirin. So why would I test my new drug against a placebo? I wouldn't do that, right? Because there's already a commonly accepted medication for it. So I could choose one of those. And then I need to give the appropriate dose. Otherwise, I'm going to be producing high level of side effects that have nothing to do with how good my drug is. It'll just look good in comparison because I made the other one so bad. So I think this is a class where I think it's important to open our eyes to how research is done, how we're also being fed research. The whole first part of this talk, what did you guys think about that? The things that cause cancer, right? What did he say about, there was, the cancer with red wine and then olive oil, fruits and vegetables. What was the issue with all of those?
There's just so many other things that come into play with that stuff that it's not just, in his example of eating just vegetables and like vegetable oil and stuff like that, there's so many other things that come into effect, like choosing certain foods usually ensues a certain lifestyle as opposed to the alternative. So that all comes into play with health too.
Yeah, totally. So that makes a huge impact. So we'll talk later on this semester about confounding variables. So variables that are playing a role in explaining the results of our study, but we are not directly measuring them. So they're kind of sneaking in and explaining away part of the results, and we're not paying attention to it because we're not being good researchers. So that's not great. And then we just need to put it in the context, right, of same thing with the wrinkle example. Like a true study would have been eat only this from birth on and lead a similar lifestyle. And, you know, that's not a feasible research. I also liked what he talked about in terms of things that we seem to know, right? It's pairing things together that are known facts. And we see that in popular media all the time, or on the news or social media. Well, you should eat your dark greens. I mean, I felt like that statement, when he put that out, what did he say exactly that doctor had said, or that nutritionist? Something about if you eat your dark greens, it'll elevate the oxygen level in your blood. Did that sound about right? And at face value, maybe you're like, okay, well, more oxygen in my blood. That sounds like something I would want. Don't know why I would, but you know, that sounds good. And I do know that, dark leafy greens, chlorophyll, he's totally right. Okay, yeah, I'm buying on that. But we're missing kind of that link of how did they go together. And it's easy for popular media, again, to just push that information out there as facts when we're really grasping at straws. It has nothing to do with anything. So even when you see that in an article online or something and it cites the source and you're like, well, they wouldn't cite the source if it wasn't accurate. I don't know if you guys have ever done that where you're like, oh, well, they cited it, so that must be legit, because if I clicked on it, then I would be able to verify. But oftentimes they're even taking a small portion of what the article said and spinning out of control from it. So, all right. Any other thoughts about the video? Anything else that stuck out to you guys? Have you guys watched videos by him, by Goodacre, before? He has several on the TED Talk websites, and they're all quite good. He's just a very good speaker, I think. Okay, let's go here. Okay. What can you guys see? Is it just a small image?
No, it takes up the whole screen. We're looking at the slide, or at least what I can see, it says ways to measure variables.
It takes up the whole screen? Okay. Okay. That's weird because that's on my other screen, but that's all right. Okay, so how do we go about measuring variables? That's a lot of what he was talking about just a moment ago. So there's certain variables here we're going to talk about in just a minute, and how we can actually operationalize it. So part of it is taking information. We talked about this, like taking abstract context or abstract concepts and then bringing them in to be measurable, right? In the social sciences, unlike in medical science, what he was talking about, we're talking usually more about abstract topics, right? Like a phenomenon. So for instance, feeling gratitude towards one's relationship partner, or wealth. How do we measure wealth? Or intelligence? So when you're measuring a variable, you need to be able to first define it really well and find a way to operationalize it, to make it seem, to be able to be measured in some way that's going to be consistent across multiple observations and occasions. Okay, so how do we operationalize this concept, maybe even of happiness? How could we determine if somebody is actually happy, as just an example?
Maybe if they laugh a lot.
Okay, so observing if they laugh. Okay. So somehow in our definition of happiness, laughing would be connected with being happy. Right? Okay. Anything else?
Maybe the way that they talk about, like in the example of the partners, the way they talk about their partners.
Okay. So how do we know that they're happy? Are they able to actually talk about their relationships maybe in a positive way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, the concept of happiness, it's not like, oh, I'm obviously a 4, right? Like we can't assign a meaning numerically that way, but we need to find a way to measure it. So you guys have both said things that you can observe. So qualitatively, you would be able to observe somebody smiling, or maybe listen in and take transcripts and hear how they're talking about the relationships and whether they sound mostly positive. Another way would be maybe giving them a survey, asking them how they feel, right? And maybe rank it strongly agree, strongly disagree in the middle, and then having them rate themselves. That'd be another way to assign meaning to it. So first you have to have a really good definition though of what is the construct you're measuring. What is happiness? I would need to flesh that out. And the way I would do that is going back to the literature and seeing what other researchers have done to do exactly that, to describe it. So this idea of well-being and happiness here at the bottom describes that. With IQ, for instance, again, an IQ test has been the most gold standard way that we measure intelligence. Now there's been some pushback, right? So is intelligence just paper and test, like IQ test intelligence, or have you guys heard of other ways?
There can be other forms of intelligence and other ways of intelligence, like musical intelligence or other focuses.
Yeah. So that's a great point, Izzy. So there's a text by, I think it was Goldman several years ago, talking about intelligence not just being verbal and nonverbal intelligence, the way we measure it on an IQ test, but also looking at Michael Jordan, for instance, and saying he's a genius because of his skill level in basketball. Same thing with musicians that are expert and just real phenomenon in their own skills. So recognizing that, if you think about an average, we were talking about that in my stats class, kind of a normal distribution of skill, you could be average, but any outlier that's just exceptional should be a sign of intelligence as well. So we would first need to define it as the bottom line and figure out where do we go from there. Okay, so let's see if this will work. Can you guys see there's like brain scans on the?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we measure? So in the social sciences, there's 3 different ways. First, we can ask people like a self-report measure. So we devise an instrument that addresses a specific construct and then ask them questions about it. What are some pitfalls about that? About just asking? This is going to be a participation heavy lecture. So if you guys, if you could pipe up, that'd be great.
They could lie about it.
Totally. You can lie to make yourself sound better or to make yourself sound worse, right? What if I asked each of you, how many caffeinated beverages have you had today? Do you guys feel like some people might have a pull to not be 100% honest about that? In what way would they respond? Maybe
they could say they had less than what they actually had.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's one of those, caffeine can kind of tip either way, right? I feel like there's a period of time when you're maybe like late high school and you're like, it's so cool. Maybe I'm just old and that's how it was back when I was younger. But we were like, oh, it's so cool to be drinking coffee. I have coffee all the time, but they might fake high. And then later on in life, and now we know you shouldn't be drinking that much coffee. That's not good for you. Maybe you lie down, you minimize, right? What about alcohol and drugs? Is that something people are going to tend to be honest about? On the whole, not, right? Why is that?
Because
illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you both said it. I mean, same thing. I'd be like, and class, please make a note of how often in terms of frequency per day that you text and drive. You'd be like, I don't want to answer that, right? It's very self-incriminating. Or how often do you donate to charity? You might feel like, oh, I don't know, but you might tend to fake a little bit better because that's something that societally we've decided is a good thing. All to say, self-report measures have inherent flaws within them because it can be swayed one way or the other, positive or negative, not always super accurate. The other big piece is it's face valid. That means anybody else, like reading it, taking the test, knows what it is you're asking. And so because they can see what they're asking, because it's face valid, they can swing the instrument one way or the other. I don't know if you guys have ever taken, like in high school, like what career are you best made for? Or where do your skills lie? I think it was called the ASVAB a long time ago, something like that. Do you guys know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. It's very clear what they're asking, right? Do you enjoy working outside and being with nature, right? If I'm like, they think I should be a park ranger, that's a no. I do not want to do that. That's not me, right? Or do you enjoy being in a hospital setting and helping others? If you're thinking you want to go in the medical field, you're like, yes, that is me, right? So because they're face valid, there could be some pitfalls with it. Second way that we can gather data, that we measure variables, is through observation. So sitting, watching, and seeing what do we see, right? So we operationalize it by looking at an observable behavior. So the example that was given earlier by Grace, for instance, if I'm going to measure happiness by how often somebody smiles, that I'm going to sit down and then take notes every time I see somebody smiling. If I'm looking at how one experiences, if they're thinking that they have an allergy, then I can sit and observe how many times they're sneezing, right? That would be a way that I would operationalize that by looking at it, measuring it, and counting it. So that's another. So lastly, physiological measures. That's when you're recording some sort of biological data. So common ones would be brain scans, which is what's the picture on there of. Another one would be a sweat response, right? How stressed you might feel. You can put little caps on your fingers and it'll actually record how much you're sweating, which is an indicator of stress. So that would be the more physiological approach. So it kind of begs the question, like, which one is best? What do you guys think?
Probably physiological measures.
Okay, well, why is that best, Jasmine?
I feel like that would be less likely to have bias in it.
Okay.
Than the other ones, because self-report would be very biased, and then observational, like you can mistake something, like when you said measuring it, like smiles for happiness, like sometimes people smile when they feel awkward or uncomfortable, so you could, that's not a part of happiness at all. So I feel like physiological, like brain scans, or there isn't that in there.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Okay. Any other thought?
Doesn't it also depend like what you're doing research on? And like in some cases, maybe a combination of all three like could be useful. Like they all could like bring in a different aspect. Like
Absolutely. Can you think of an example where like of a research question or a research situation that it would be better to utilize, for instance, self-report or observation?
I'm trying to think of something like where it would be beneficial for the person to be honest, like, so, or like something that you couldn't do a logical measure on, like, so I'm blanking, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm pushing. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. It really depends on each scenario. Let's face it, our brain scans, is that something that is easily done for large numbers of people? No. Why is that, Tarshana? You shook your head right away.
Brain scans can be costly, and it'll take a very long time to like get a huge number of people, because brain scans, you have to go like in this big machine. So to get each person in and out of that in a timely manner, that could take like decades.
Yeah.
Depending on how many people are in the study.
Right. You're absolutely correct. So it's cost prohibitive and it is time prohibitive, right? And let's put the third piece. We talked about informed consent. Not everyone's going to be super thrilled about doing that, right? They'll be far more likely, like, oh, you want me to take your survey? Fine, just email it to me, right? They're more likely to be on board with that versus a brain scan. There's also certain instances that a brain scan, excuse me, I could feel it coming, you guys. It's a bad feeling.
Bless you.
Thank you. There's other situations where observation, for instance, is really key. Have you guys heard of that study on, I think it was like social norming and kind of social, not obedience like the studies that we talked about, Milgram and all that, but more like groupthink. Did you guys see the elevator one? Does anybody know what I'm talking about here?
Yeah.
Okay. So that one, they're coming in an elevator, right? And I could stand up, but it's not going to really make a difference. But if you're stepping into an elevator, are people, as you're walking in, what's your usual behavior? What do you usually do?
Face the door and the buttons.
Right. So you usually turn your whole body around, then face the door with the buttons. Or, sometimes then things get mixed up because there's doors on both sides or buttons on both sides. But for the most part, people walk into an elevator, they promptly turn around, face the other way. So I'm not sure that a brain scan would be able to tap into that kind of group thing, right? Because the study was instead of having everybody face back this way, right? The person's walking and everybody's facing them. People were facing the other way. And so then the person kind of just stood there for half a second and then turned themselves around to face the other way, thinking, well, maybe I'm missing something, so I'll just do that. There's also another great test where there's like 2 lines like this, right? Oh gosh, these are the times I'm like, I need to have my props done before class because this is not going to be very easily seen. And they'll go around the room and say, please note which of these, bar 1 or bar 2, is taller. And then everyone goes around a circle and everyone, so which one is taller? And they're like 2, 2, 2. And then the person who's actually part of the study is like looking at it and looking around and they're like 2, right? Like they're somehow missing something. That's not the kind of study that a brain scan would necessarily bring as much data as just observing. And then on the contrast, self-report surveys are fantastic at especially assessing things like personality traits, especially when they're not going to be visible in an observable way. Like again, observations take time. You cannot get as many people through, right? It's harder to get that many people. So self-report surveys are easier in that sense. So pros and cons on all ends, just having to figure out what makes the most sense for the study is the key piece. Okay. All right, so let's talk now about the scales of measurement. So if you're going to be measuring, well, taking a step back, there's different ways that you're going to sort your data when you go through and actually measure it. So there's categorical variable and quantitative variables. They need to have at least 2 levels so that you can see change, right? So when you're operationalizing it, there needs to be more than one. So if you could see here, categorical, the levels are categories. So for instance, what is your nationality? What type of music do you enjoy? What kind of phone do you use? So different categories are provided. And then quantitative, that's somehow your level is measured in terms of meaningful numbers, right? So how many speeding tickets have you had? Or something like that, some sort of a number based, how much do you weigh? Or do you know what I mean? Like it's an actual number. So it's not based on categories. It's just an actual value that you're getting. So categories, that's kind of its own branch. And then once you get to quantitative, it divides into 3. So there's ordinal data, there's interval data, and ratio data. The first ordinal data, that's where the numbers represent some sort of rank order. So first, second, third, the example here, rank your 10 favorite movies from worst to best, right? So there's some sort of order implied. So that's ordinal. Second is interval. So that's a quantitative variable that actually has no true 0. That's going to be the ratio one. There's no true 0. So IQ score, you can't really have an IQ of 0, right? Shoe size, again, it's not going to mean anything. But from one shoe size to the other, the difference between the two still has meaning, right? Oh, okay. So you can take a peek at that. Sorry, it looks like I didn't realize you guys could actually doodle on this, huh? Is that right? Or did I just hallucinate something?
No, I just wanted to see if that was a thing because I just realized you could too, but I didn't know that everyone else could see it.
That's pretty cool. Okay. All the things you learned about Zoom. And then lastly is ratio. So that's a quantitative variable where the numbers have a meaningful distance between them, but there is also an actual 0. So in terms of that, you're looking at an exam score, for instance, like that number of exam questions answered correctly, how many seconds to respond to a computer task, your height, your weight. There can't actually be a true 0 with that. So that's how we do have the scales of measurement. Okay, next up, let's talk about reliability. So reliability really asks the questions, are the scores consistent? Meaning, as I am measuring this construct using this given tool, am I going to get a similar result one time after the other? Like, is it consistent over time? So, few things about that. why do we care about reliability? Why would we want to know if we're going to get the same thing over and over again?
Because the data is not as useful, like if it can't be applied and if it can't be like replicated, then it won't like sorry, blanking again. It won't be
No.
like not as useful if it can't be
Yeah.
replicated.
Yeah, so if I have, you're spot on. So if I have a medical test that reliably identifies the presence of a certain virus, for instance, that is important. If it is not reliable, that means at any given time, it could be positive or negative, whether or not the virus was present or not, right? That's not great. Now, it is possible for a test to be reliable and not be valid. We'll talk about that. So it's possible to have consistent results, right? So like, again, if I was teaching this class in French, you would consistently get a bad score, but that's because it's not measuring the right thing. So to be consistent and reliable is one part that makes the test good. So the three types of reliability that we'll talk about in just a minute, we'll go through them, but you can use a scatter plot to evaluate how reliable an instrument is. And then you can also use the correlation coefficient. That's the biggest one that we use. It's Pearson R to look at reliability again, how well one is able to get the same kind of response, like how stable is it over time. When you read about reliability in journal articles, you'll see these two things. So first will be Cronbach's alpha, and it'll be presented. See, now I kind of want to test it out. Oh no, see, it doesn't work for me. I wish. It'll be like this. Let's see, now I don't have your faces up here. Okay, that'll be the Cronbach alpha. The closer you get to 1, the better. That means it's more internally reliable. And then you'll get a Pearson R, which will be a value that'll range from 0 to 1 or -1. It could be either way. And that shows how correlated test and retest and interreliability is. Okay, so 3 types of reliability. So first we look at the test-retest reliability, meaning if I give this test now, and then I wait a week and I give it to you again, how reliable are your scores gonna be, right? Does it measure something in a snapshot in an instant, or is it gonna be reliable and stable through time? So that's test-retest reliability. Inter-rater reliability is a little bit different. So that means you get consistent reports or consistent scores no matter who is doing the measuring. So going back to our example earlier in regards to SMILE, I could have 4 of you, and we'll do some of this in our qualitative exercise. Could have 4 of you where I'm like, please look around. We're going to go to a shopping center, and I want to see how many people that you notice are smiling. And the 4 of you are going to be looking at the same group of people. But the way you interpret someone smiling may be different than your neighbor, right? And that's why we have multiple observers, and then we corroborate, we check in with one another as to what results we got. The higher the inter-rater reliability is, the better, right? That means that our methodology is more robust and that we've all defined and scored things the same. If you have very poor inter-rater reliability, that means the scores are not necessarily going to be meaningful, because I could see that everyone is happy around me. And then John Doe next to me is like, not a single person smiled. And we looked at the same people. So there's some pitfalls there. So that's why that is an important one to keep in mind. And lastly is internal reliability. That is how consistent internally a specific survey may be. So you're looking at consistent patterns of responses, regardless of how the question was phrased. So if I ask you, so on strongly agree to strongly disagree, I like being alone. I enjoy being by myself. I like being in large groups. So you see those 3 questions, 2 of them were very similar. The third one was kind of flipped on its head. So to have strong internal reliability, the individual taking the test needs to have answered completely the opposite, right? This prevents against people who decide that they're just going to answer randomly, right? There's this true, 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 true. I'm sure you guys have seen that. Like, I'm going to mark C for everything, right? That shows poor internal consistency because no matter how the question is phrased, the answer remains the same. So I'm not responding the same way every single time. Does that make sense? Okay. You guys are really quiet tonight. I don't know if people are tired or what the scoop is. Okay, let's talk about that. So here's a scatter plot to evaluate reliability. So the question is, let's measure head circumference and see what that looks like. So this is the first measurement, and down here is the second measurement. So then you would plot them against one another. So if the first time, let's say it was 50 centimeters and the second time it was 50 centimeters, it'd be right here. So you see this line? This is an equidistant line for the most part. Yeah, that's where the intersect would be to show like 100% reliability. So if I look at Taylor, right, her head measurement at first was 50, and then the second time was 52. Kendra, first time was 61, second time was 59. Mateo, first time was 65, second time was 64. And then last one was 75 versus 80. So the question is, what does this mean, right? Well, the closer you are to this line, right, ends up being how close, speaking to the reliability of it. So you want to make sure that you're as close as possible. So as you see, most of these just have a difference of 2. And then we've got Kurt way over here that ends up being quite a bit off from what he was. Now from this line, it doesn't actually look that far out, but it is a difference of 5 versus just the 2, okay? So the dots, again, they represent how close they are to the slope line, and you wanna make sure that you have reliable data. So looking at this, just the initial table, you're able to see the difference between each one. Let's look at this other example that shows things a little bit different. Okay, now inter-rater reliability. So this is showing, it was specifically, they were measuring for the data of happiness, again, kind of going back to our example. This is observer Mark and this is observer Matt, and they were observing Jay and Jackie. So if the data shows this pattern right here, it means that both Matt and Mark have good inter-rater reliability. So as they went through, their data really collided and fell along the slope of the line, which showed good reliability. When you see here, whoops, I'm knocking things over, a slightly different pattern is emerging, right? So it means that Mark, in this instance, and Peter, on the other hand, had poor inter-rater reliability. So they disagreed about Jackie. Mark rated here that Jackie was one of the least happy children. You see it's almost the lowest, this dot may be similar. But Peter, on the other hand, marked her as very happy, like one of the happiest in the sample. So you need to make sure, again, that would be one way of measuring how reliable the data is. Okay, next one over, we can evaluate the correlation coefficient. So that's another measure of reliability. It's a single number, it's a value that you don't need to know all the math about it, that describes how close the dots are on the line, on the scatter plot to the line that's drawn through them. So that's the coefficient R, correlation coefficient R. So again, when you're looking at this data, the closely aligned it is to your slope, the more reliable it becomes. So are the dots close or are they spread apart is the question you want to ask. The direction of the line, however, that's a whole other piece. So as you can see in this one, you would probably start at 0 and go straight through, right? You can see that there's a positive slope. In fact, here it is again. That's a definite positive slope. Note here that R is 0.93. I don't know if you guys remembered earlier, but it goes up to 1. That is the most reliable, highest level of correlation that you can see, would be 1 or -1. So this is an extremely correlated response, right? Very, very reliable. This one, 0.56, in the social sciences, you get a 0.56 correlation coefficient. You have a party. This is lovely, right? This almost never happens. Now, the slope of the line here, I don't know if you guys see that, but that goes downward. So again, the idea is the more this happened, the less this occurs here. So that is a negative slope of negative 0.59. And then what do you see in this one? Where do you see the slope going? What do you think?
B or C?
D.
To me, it looks like it's negative.
Okay.
To me, it looks like there is no slope.
Yeah, this is very sporadic, right? So here we could see low on both, but then here it's low on one, high on the other, vice versa. So this here, the closer you are to 0, the closer it means there's no relationship. So the slope here would be probably going across this way and flat, okay? So no relationship. So this would be very poor reliability. So again, we can measure those, the test-retest reliability, inter-rater reliability, and the internal reliability. Again, how reliable are the questions and items within a scale. Okay, so how do we read about reliability in journal articles? What does that look like? So you can see here, these are the estimates of internal consistency and temporal reliability for the satisfaction with life scale. So you can see the different studies that they found and looked at. The coefficient alpha, that's like the Cronbach alpha, that's looking at the internal consistency of the scale. Again, anything above 0.7 is excellent. So what do we notice about these? What do the studies show?
Good internal reliability.
Good internal reliability and internal consistency. Yes, very good. Test, retest. That means they provided this test, the satisfaction with life scale, to participants more than once. Here's the interval between them. And they found the following correlational coefficient. So you can see here, this one, the 0.83, 0.84, 0.82 were very, very strong test, retest reliability. Now, this one, the 0.64, 0.50, and 0.54 had much lower reliability. What might be one hypothesis you can deduce from them?
That the internal reliability retest is not the same as the first internal reliability test, something like that.
Okay, so yeah, this is looking at how, this particular one is looking at how internally valid the responses were, right? How well the items hung together. And this is looking at how consistent people responded. So if I got 100 the first time, did I get close to 100 the second time, or vice versa? But notice the amount of time between the test and retest. There's a relationship here. These two, so 10 weeks, what is that? That's like 2.5 months, 2 months and change probably. And 4 years, those were poor test-retest reliability, but they were also the greatest amount of time. So what might that suggest?
That the longer you wait for a retest, that the more likely they are to like fail. Not necessarily fail, but like their scores will go down significantly over time.
This one doesn't say if it goes down or up, but they'll be significantly different, right?
Yeah.
The score will be different from the first time it was given. Thanks for sharing that. That was right on, Tarshana. So again, and if you think about it, if I'm looking at satisfaction with life scale, Is that going to change over the course of 4 years? Probably, right? My sense of satisfaction with life is probably going to be different, right? Not good or bad, just different. 4 years is a long time for stuff to happen. So the longer the amount of time, the less reliable the test retest reliability is going to be. Unless you're measuring something that is just acutely crystallized, meaning it is never going to change. And there are very few things in life that are like that. So again, different types of reliability, and this is how it would be highlighted in a journal article. Okay, let's look at the reliability here, or the validity of measurements. So validity, does it actually measure what it's supposed to measure? So we think it's measuring maybe stepping on a scale, maybe I want to say it measures health. Is that a good measurement of health, how much you weigh?
No.
No. Why not? Can we think of examples?
Because muscle weighs more than fat. So if you just had a lot of muscle, you would be like insanely overweight.
Right. Okay, so just one measure, if I'm going to think, I just want to know, are you healthy? And I'm going to just weigh you. That is not a valid indicator of health. I need to define that more and measure it in different ways. So the face validity, so let's talk about all the different types of validity. Face validity and content validity is, does it look like a good measure? Can I look at it and think, yes, this is what I'm measuring, okay? Criterion validity is, does it correlate with key behaviors? So does weight correlate, does it have good, strong criterion validity with blood pressure, for example, or hypertension, or that's probably close to being the same, or A1C's level for diabetes, right? So I can look at how, what other researchers have said, these are key indicators or other measurements towards health. Does my measurement of health here actually connect pretty well with other measures out there? Again, criterion validity. Convergent validity and discriminant validity, meaning does the pattern make sense? Does the more I weigh, maybe the more I frequent fast food chains? I'm making stuff up here. So does it seem like it goes in the same direction, or vice versa? Does the more I weigh, the less I go to the gym if I'm going to go on fat versus muscle, right? So it's important when you do your measurement that you compare it against something, and then you have some idea to either validate it and say, yep, this is an accurate measurement. And it can either be by finding something else that's in the same line that you're like, yep, that's the same, or I expect this to behave the opposite way, kind of like my example earlier. An introvert would probably strongly disagree with, I like to hang out in big groups, right? Does it correspond accordingly? Does the pattern make sense ultimately? And then there's a relationship between reliability and validity. Those two interact with one another a great deal. So measuring head circumference, for instance, is very reliable. Your head circumference is not going to change a great deal over time, but it is not a valid measure of IQ, right? It used to be believed as that, like the bigger the head, the bigger the brain, therefore, smarter you are. That's been debunked. Oh, we got a puppy. Again, a broken scale, right, may not be reliable, or it may be reliable, I should say, because it's going to give me the same number every single day, but it may not be valid, right? Like 100 pounds. Oh, it's 100 pounds every single day, but it's not a valid measurement. So it's consistent and reliable, but it is not a valid measurement. So again, when you're looking at measurement, it needs to meet both criteria. Otherwise, it just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so here's the different types of validity. Oh, there's statistical validity, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. So construct validity, let's start here. So if there's two ways to assess, right, you can look at face validity, we just talked about that. How much does it look like what you want to measure? And content validity, does it measure, does it contain all the parts of the theory that I say it should contain? There's three ways of assessing it. We just finished talking about that: criterion validity, convergent, and discriminant validity. And then does it actually show good reliability? And that'll impact directly the construct validity. Because reliability is necessary, but it is not sufficient. Again, you can have something that is reliable without being valid, okay? But in order to be valid, it should be reliable. It's kind of the square and the rectangle idea, right? You guys know what I mean by that? Like a rectangle is always a square, but a square is not a rectangle. Okay. So how do we get consistent scores every single time? So there's got to be strong test-retest reliability, strong inter-rater reliability, meaning more than one person agrees on the score, and it's got to be internally reliable as well. Okay, so those are the measurements of validity and abstract constructs. Okay, face validity. Let's dive into some of these a little bit more. Both of these are subjective ways to assess validity. It's really at face value. That's all you're looking at. So face value or face validity, it looks like what you want to measure. So I'm interested in measuring extroversion, and I ask you a question as to whether you like to be in groups. Very face valid, right? Those two really line up together. If I am measuring your head size, maybe I'm measuring your hat size. Those go together. If I'm trying to assess religiosity, I can ask people if they're religious, right? This is what I want to measure. Here's how I'm going to go to it. It's very face valid. Content validity is the measure. It's asking if it contains all the parts of the theory that I think it needs to. So IQ, I can't just go, what's your vocabulary? That is not the broad definition of IQ or you know, of intelligence as a whole. The intelligence quotient test has been created to have both verbal and nonverbal reasoning as part of it, including memory, problem solving. There's different facets of it. So you can't just take one tiny bit and say that that explains the whole. That is not good content validity. Okay. Now, criterion validity. We often in the social sciences, we want to look at actual data, right? Subjective assessment, like it looks face valid, that's not great. We want to actually see criterion validity. Does it come together? Does it make sense empirically? So if you work for, as an example, if you work for a company that wants to predict how well job applicants are going to be, you could give them an IQ to predict how good you'll be at sales, for instance, right? So this is the sales ability, so the one on the right, that's IQ scores and the sales in thousands of dollars. Or I could do a sales ability test and the sales then in thousands of dollars. So which of the two shows that it's more correlated, right? The best predictor. The sales ability test has better criterion validity, right, than the IQ, because you can see it's following that line very, very strongly, whereas here there's several spots that are further out. So this would be a correlation coefficient that would be very high, probably like 0.9, whereas this would be closer to 0.3. So this is not to say that IQ is not a good predictor, but it is not as good as the sales ability test score. Okay, so that would be an example of criterion validity. Okay. Next up, we can also see how it correlates with key behaviors. So usually when we look at criterion validity, it's represented as correlation coefficients, just like I just talked about a second ago. That would be, you know, that slope of the line, seeing how well they're correlated. But it can also be shown as a known group paradigm, just like that's described here in your text. So it's you examine whether scores on the measure can distinguish among a set of group of who's, you know, you're looking at a group of people whose behavior is already well understood. So if I look, this is the Beck Depression Inventory. It's a short scale that measures depression. The idea is, does it actually really differentiate between these two groups? Meaning, if I give this BDI to non-depressed groups and a depressed group, am I going to see a significant difference between the two? Okay, that is the known group paradigm. I'm again comparing it between those two. to see if there's going to be a significant difference. I could also split it up and give it to folks who show different levels of depression. So no depression versus mild, moderate, and severe. So I can split it up then within those and see how well they're related. Again, this could also point to statistical significance, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Okay. Oops, here we go. Known groups evidence for criterion validity. So this is, again, this is a 5-item subjective well-being scale for different groups of individuals. Which of those groups have the highest subjective well-being score? What do you think?
French Canadian college students.
Yeah, and was that you, Grace? No, yes. How did you figure that out?
Because they're the least impoverished group out of all of those people.
Okay, so you looked at the groups and from there figured it out. Did you look at the mean scores? You didn't. Okay, that was spot on. But if you see here, this is N is the sample size, how many people they polled or measured. M is the group mean. You can see it right here. So the mean of that particular group. SD is the standard deviation, and then this is the reference paper. So the group with the highest score, I mean, you're really close with the French Canadian male student at 23.8. There's printing trade workers at 24.2, pretty close. Which one has the lowest well-being score, subjective well-being score?
The veterans.
Yeah, the veterans group has the lowest group. Again, this is a known group, right? If I'm thinking who probably struggles a little bit with this idea of well-being, right? Who would score low? A veteran who's in an inpatient hospital, probably pretty low.
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Tarsha.
How did you find the first one? Like, how did you know that was the most one? Because when I looked at the means, I would have picked like the printing trade workers because of the mean is 24.2. And then you said was that the correct one or was the correct one French Canadians?
No, but I mean, so Grace was not even looking at the mean, but she just based on these groups was thinking this would be the least disenfranchised group, which is pretty close. So no, you're correct, Tarshana, 24.2, that group shows the highest level, but it's closely followed by the French Canadian male students, which outnumber American college students. What do we think about that, right? Well, so you guys, I'm French Canadian, and I do think I'm happy all the time, so I can kind of see that, although I'm not a college student anymore. Note also at the bottom of the list, aside from the VA, we also have male prison inmates, right? So we are using groups, and then abused women. So there's some known groups that we're gonna know something about them. We know they're gonna rank in a certain way, so then we can also make some comparison to it. So, okay. That's a quick 5-item scale. So it's not the best of scale, but it's something. Okay. Ooh, what is happening here with the slide? It's looking all funky. What can I have 2 screens, you guys, and it's weird because I'm switching it on one screen and it's impacting the other. Okay, so convergent validity and discriminant validity. Ultimately, the question is, does the pattern make sense? Okay, so on the left right here, okay, so it's the BDI, right? Your BDI total score with a measure of depression that's called the CESD. It's a subscale of that particular Center for Epidemiologic Studies. It's a depression scales. You see that those scores really come together. Again, if I were to draw a line, it'd be right here, highly correlated. Okay, Beck Depression Inventory. Now, on the other one, here's a discriminant validity, meaning it's going to have the opposite, like, not a strong relationship, right? I'm trying to discriminate against that. So this is gonna correlate a lot less strongly. I'm looking here at the BDI score. Again, it's the same kind of total score with a physical health measure, right? Some sort of physical health score. Well, they may have a slight relationship, but that may not be necessary. Now, if I did the BDI with the happiness scale, well, the higher my depression score, it's probably the lower my happiness scale. That would be another way to discriminate, right? It's opposite. The pattern makes sense. The same way with my extroversion, introversion example earlier. If I'm giving an extroversion type test and I ask questions, I enjoy being alone all the time. If I'm trying to make the case for extroversion, that response should be a strongly disagree, right? So the pattern follows what you would expect. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. This is the appreciation and relationship scale. There's several items right here. Oh boy, I don't know what happened to my slides that they're all funkified. Okay, let's see here. It's not helping. You guys will need to play with it when you get access to it. Let's see, I'm going to do one more thing. Okay. So I don't know why these are repeating themselves. They're just the items up here. So these are the items in the appreciation scale. So one, I tell my partner often that he or she is the best. I often tell my partner how much I appreciate him or her. At times I take my partner for granted. Note here, it says reverse score. Now, quick question. Why do we have reverse scored items on a scale?
So people can't just mark one answer for everything.
Exactly. Major bonus points here. What type of validity is that to support? You guys remember? It's probably like 45 minutes ago. So it's been a little while. More data's turned into your brain. It's for internal consistency. So they are responding consistently to the same items, right? Okay, so I appreciate my partner. Sometimes I don't really acknowledge or treat my partner like he or she is someone special. That's another one that's reverse scored. I make sure my partner feels appreciated. My partner sometimes says that I fail to notice the nice things he or she does for me. That's another reverse score. I acknowledge the things that my partner does for me, even the really small things, and I am sometimes struck with a sense of awe and wonder when I think about my partner being in my life. Whew, just so sweet. So if I was taking this and making sure that both partners were taking it, this would need to show that it's a reliable and valid scale. In fact, we know this of this particular scale. People were more appreciative, right? Who were more appreciative were more likely to be together 9 months later. So this was a predictive kind of study. If they showed high levels of appreciation at the time of the test, they were more likely to have remained together over a period of 9 months. Okay, can you guys think of any of these items that you're like, oh, that's really face valid? Like if you didn't know that this was a scale that measured the level of appreciation in relationships, would you be able to figure that out from the questions?
Number 6 actually says appreciated in it. So
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Grace. In fact, if we go through, the word appreciate pops up 1, 2, 3, 3 times just in that one scale. That's a 9-item scale. So 30% of the questions have the word appreciated through it, which is kind of a hint, right? A bit of face valid. With these kinds of scales, do you guys think this might benefit from a like discriminant validity question on there, something that would be directly against what we're saying?
Isn't sometimes I take my partner for granted one of example of that? It's opposite of appreciation.
It's exactly right. All of the reverse scored items are exactly that. They're discriminant validity. So they're flipping it around, which is giving us good internal consistency too, but it's turning the question around to really discriminate. So the question is, if I answered this as yes, right? I don't know exactly what the scale is, if it's a yes, strongly agree, whatever. Can it also be true that I really appreciate my partner, right? Can the two coexist? Sometimes the answer is yes, they can coexist, but you should see higher levels of one thing and lower levels for the discriminant validity. That's just how it works when you're giving the instrument. So, yeah. Okay. So some takeaway points between reliability and validity. So first, validity of a measure is not the same as the reliability of a measure. I think I've said that several times already throughout the course of tonight. One does not equal the rest. So reliability is really how well does a measure correlate with itself, whereas validity is how well is a measure associated with something else, right? So reliability is far more internal, right? Or inter-rater, like, but still it's internal to that particular thing. Whereas validity is looking at other things, looking outside of it, how well do they hang together? So a measure can be less valid than it is reliable. The broken scale example is an excellent one. It is extremely reliable, but it is not valid. But it cannot be more valid than it is reliable, okay? You can't claim to be measuring intelligence, for instance, and not have strong internal reliability. That does not go. Then it becomes, if you have low reliability, automatically you have low validity. The two go that way in that direction. Reliability is necessary, but it is not in and of itself sufficient for validity. So again, head circumference, very reliable, but is not a valid measure of intelligence. And then similarly, a broken scale, very reliable, not a good measure of actual weight. Okay. Questions for me on this one tonight? It's a lot of info. Read up on the chapter on reliability and validity because that is a huge component. You guys need to really think through how you will measure your particular variables. So in each of your groups, this would be a good time tonight to just email one another, touch base on your specific topics on, hey, if we're looking at a stress management, let's say, how am I going to measure stress? Because little sneak peek here, a little red alert, we don't have stress or the galvanized sweat response accessible to us. So it's going to have to be self-report. That's the only thing we really have on hand. Like I said, later on this semester, we will do a qualitative observational study as a team or as a group. But for your specific paper, it's going to have to be a self-report measure. So start thinking, how are we going to define the terms and how are we going to operationalize them so that we can measure them effectively? The next piece will be finding a survey that you can give that's hopefully short, but that shows high level of reliability and high level of validity. Questions about that?
Do you want us, like, if one of our variables already has like a survey, or like a questionnaire, do you want us to follow those, or is part of it like coming up with our own like measurement?
I love that you asked that question because it's probably the 4th year I teach this course and I always forget to say that. Thank you, Bridget. You are not designing your own scale. There is no way that in the course of our class, there is enough time to develop a scale. So just as a hint, in grad school, it's an entire year of what's called psychometrics on how to properly construct a scale that's going to be valid and reliable. It's far more advanced than what we're doing today. Having said that, in the survey that you give, you may end up asking questions like, what year of school are you, or how old are you? So you may write those kinds of questions that are more based on the demographics, but for you to come up with your own assessment of anxiety, no, we're not going to be doing that. Does that help, Bridget? Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Okay, so absolutely. I am hopeful that all of your topics have plenty of different survey options that you guys can utilize. And you may need to cater. Earlier, I think in the class, I was talking about a particular scale and specifically the subscale of depression. So if you have a really large scale, they're like, that's 200 questions. I'm not going to get anybody to fill out 200 questions. But I can see that the subscale I'm interested in is only 9 questions. We can certainly take that portion of it. So we'll pick and choose accordingly. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
When are we administering our like surveys and stuff?
So, well, first we need to firm up all of the groups. Next week, we're going to talk in more detail as to what needs to be written. It's going to be kind of a part 2 of the literature review that I discussed last week. And then once that's done, we're going to go into survey selection. So probably after the first exam. Yeah. So still plenty of time. Tarshana, I got to ask. I've been staring at it the whole class. Is that Olaf behind you? It is Olaf. Oh, I like warm hugs.
I got it for Christmas as like a little corny date thing.
Well,
but
it's very sweet.
He sits on my bed.
It is.
It might be a little creepy when you wake up in the middle of the night, but it's.
You're like, oh, yeah. So my kids had one that there was Velcro between the different ball. It was like from the first movie. So there's Velcro between the different sections of its body, which is kind of fun, right? You can kind of reorganize it. But then we just find the head randomly around. I'm like, it's weird. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't like that. All right. That's what I've got for you guys tonight. This is a meatier, kind of less pleasant, fun, uplifting.
Question.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So are you able to like get emails? Like, are you receiving the emails like and stuff like that?
I think so.
I hope so, because I like been emailing you. It's like, I don't know if you've been getting it or not. So I'm like,
have I not responded? Because
no.
Then I'm probably not getting it because I think I'm caught up unless you just sent them in class right now.
No, they were kind of old, but it was just like an email. It's like, can you add me to the class? But it was because I couldn't find the link. But that was just from before. I just wanted to know if you were getting them.
I think that first week of class, or right around Labor Day, you had asked me about the Zoom link, and I did not even see it in my email. I do see it in my email right now. You can't see that because of the glare, but I do see it now. I did add. Thank you for reminding me about this as well. Let me see how I can do this here. Nope, none of those are it. Let's go here. Here's our class. Okay, try it again. Here it is. This is the problem, you guys. I have can you see how many windows I have open? I need to work on that. That's why I can never find where anything is. I did add this link. Did I talk about this already tonight? The class lecture link? Okay, I did? No. Okay, so this is the link to the YouTube page that has all of our class lectures. So I'm not gonna be, I think last week, here I'd put research lecture. I'm not gonna be linking it this way. I'm just gonna add it here, and it's always gonna be added directly to the YouTube page. It's gonna be labeled, research methods, 916, part 1 or part 2, like tonight, there's only one part because it wasn't quite as long. There's also gonna be stats if you're like, oh, let me learn about stats. Go right on ahead, knock yourself out, and watch the stats videos too if you'd like. Obviously you don't have to, but those are on the same page as well. So, and Tarshana, that triggered my memory because the Zoom link is right here now. So do you guys have that on your page? Because I know mine looks probably a little different. Okay, So you should have the Zoom link, the syllabus, and the class lecture should all be there. Okay. All right. Any other questions for me? No. Okay. Reach out if you have any additional questions, anything else pops up. Again, text me. Don't hesitate to do that. Hesitate a little if it's like 1 a.m. because I'm not going to respond and it's going to be on silent on my nightstand. But otherwise, that's probably the fastest way to get a hold of me. Okay. All right. So I am still waiting for the one group to submit their research project. Make sure that you get this done and we'll go from there. All right. Have a great night, everyone. See you next week.